Mia Moss is a speculative fiction writer from the Pacific Northwest, now living in, in the San Francisco area. Her stories have been published in Cat Ladies of the Apocalypse, Starship Sofa, Galactic Stew, and elsewhere. When she's not writing, she enjoys running around the feral outdoors, DMing tabletop campaigns, making cocktails for her friends, and admiring her enormous TBR pile. Mia, take it away.
Thank you so much. So I also have a book to give away. This is a novella. It's my first novella, published just earlier this month on July 12th. And it is called My Ties for the Lost. I'm just going to start at the beginning. It is sort of a noir science fiction. I would call it yacht rock Bioshock noir. So I hope that that is your thing. So November 9th, 2112. It was 6 in the evening, and the sea above electric blue moon was a riot of storm-tossed flotsam and unlucky fish. The call came in just as I was finishing the first round of a 3-glass dinner of seaweed gin at Infinity's Cup, the favorite liquor cabinet of the Habitat's young, reckless, and overmoneyed progeny. Infinity Kovac himself was tending bar that night, slinging vintage trashy cocktails to classic house music in the moody purple light. He paused when my comm buzzed next to my hand, the bottle of gin hovering a silent question mark over my empty glass. I glanced at the screen. It was Disco Bishop, my brother Rocket's fiancé. I nodded for Infinity to pour me another and picked up my comm. I could polish off 10 drinks before Disco was done talking. Marrow, it's Disco. His voice was strung higher than the lofty domed habitat roof. I sighed and motioned for Infinity to leave the bottle. Yeah, I know it's you, Disco. What's the matter? Rocket, oh God, Marrow, I don't know how else to say it. Rocket is dead. Disco, baby, what do you mean Rocket's dead? I just saw him not 2 hours ago. He was fine, perfectly healthy. Rocket Nightingale was a force of nature. Young, beautiful, charismatic, wealthy as a king, and generous as a saint. His life was one unbroken stream of flashy parties and delightful adventures. He was also my older and only brother. He wasn't the kind of asshole to turn up dead out of the blue on an otherwise uneventful Wednesday. Someone killed him. I came home to change for dinner party at the Van Houtens, and there he was, sprawled out in the foyer with his skull in pieces and blood all over the tile and, God, Marrow, the goddamn foyer. He cut off with a choked sob. I tried to find the bottom of my stomach, but it was as though some unseen hand had scooped it out, every ounce of guts, and left me scrambling for nothing but cold emptiness. When I finally found the air to speak, it was as though someone else had taken over my vocal cords. I sounded frosty smooth and alien to my own ears. All right, honey. Stay where you are. Can you do that? I'm on my way now. Fix us both a strong drink while you wait. I sure didn't need another, but it sounded like he could use one. It would at least keep him preoccupied for a while. And Disco, don't call anyone else until I get there, all right? Sure, Marrow. No one else. Especially Habsec, I stressed. No cops. Disco knew better than to call Habsec, but a bad shock to the nerves can make people do stupid things. Habitat security goons stomping all over a crime scene, attracting every tabloid and radio range. That was the last thing we needed. I ended the transmission and stood up, pushing the bottle away. Infinity came over to settle my tab, and I held up a hand to stop him. Chances are high. I'm just going to talk Disco down off the ceiling, and I'll be back inside an hour, I said. And if not, I'll see you tomorrow. Same time as always, pal. Infinity nodded in time with the music, indifferent to the specifics of the emergency, and moved on to other patrons. I grabbed my things, pushed through the arriving after-work crowds, and caught the streetcar heading uptown. Electric Blue Moon isn't the biggest, and it's definitely not the most technologically advanced habitat city in the Pacific, but it is the third oldest and comfortably ranks among the top 5 wealthiest. It was built and funded by the type of dynastic old money that likes to buy one hulking set of furniture for their mansion and pass it down through the generations, regardless of how out of fashion it is. Half of them are still using the same dead wood furnishings their ancestors lucked down with them to the bottom of the sea. The closets all came pre-lined with skeletons, too. That old money is built into the DNA of this hab. The smell of dusty, hoarded cash perfumes the very atmosphere that circulates through the ventilation, breathed in and exhaled by 100,000 souls. It's a hardwood and gilded corners kind of place, a fantasia desperate to recall a surface world myth that never existed in the first place. The electric streetcars even make old-timey, clangy bell noises as they glide through the foot traffic. A serene synthetic voice announced my stop, and I ran fingertips along the age-worn, authentic wood paneling as I disembarked. The last cedars on the planet had probably been cut down to contribute such finishing touches. When I got to Rocket and Disco's place, I nearly kept right on walking. Habsec's chief security officer, Varsity Beckett, was waiting outside the gate in his ridiculous turquoise uniform and white sailor's scarf, looking real anxious to arrest someone for something. I could tell by the way he hefted his meat slab physique off the fence and rested one twitchy hand on his sidearm that he was hoping it would be me. My breath caught for the briefest of moments. If Habsec was already on the scene... But no, my brother had been alive and healthy just hours ago. I could practically still smell his body wash from when he leaned in to tousle my hair as I'd left. I'd been on the comm with a client, and my last gesture to my older brother had been to flip him off on my way out the door. I banished the thought with a scoff. If you're here to see Rocket, evidently you just missed him. I let my shoulder connect with his as I unlatched the gate and continued up the short walkway to the door. Marrow Nightingale, Varsity spat, as though my name itself was a murder charge. So quick with the quips? I've got some questions for you before you go inside. Give me a break, Varsity. I'm here on about a family emergency. You just get here? Seems awfully convenient timing, you showing up right after the morgue picked up the body. The body. Disco hadn't been hallucinating. My jaw clenched tight, but I refused to rise to Varsity's bait. I was well aware that anything I said would most certainly be used against me in his case write-ups. He'd been looking for a way to get me off the hab ever since he'd picked up his badge. It boils down to this. Electric Blue's got two types of bastards, rich ones and poor ones. There are the wealthy, and there are the people who scrub the toilets of the wealthy or do their taxes, or sometimes both, if they're the kind of poors with the right amount of hustle. When everything went straight to hell topside and the billionaires of Earth took refuge in the sea, they still needed their chefs, hairstylists, concierges, and housekeepers, and their Habsec security chiefs. Many of the toilet scrubbers have worked hard to build little worker bee dynasties of their own, working overtime to ensure their children can live out of harm's way under the oceans. But the threat of deportation to the surface always looms large. Habsec are police, judge, and executioner, and there's two ways it's going to end for a body if they ever get caught breaking the rules. A hefty fine they'll never work off, or a one-way ticket to the surface. In other words, permanent exile. For you, your spouse, your kids, probably their kids too, just to be thorough. A twist of fate had elevated me, the humble daughter of service workers, out of reach from Habsec's threats and therefore out of their power. And if there was one thing men like Varsity hated more than anything, it was feeling impotent. I'm sure I don't know what you're insinuating, Officer Beckett. Have you had zero sensitivity training? What in the world are my family's generous annual donations to Habsec being used for? I looked Varsity square in his dull, narrow eyes for one long moment. I held his gaze until his face turned a blotchy shade of red, and he suddenly became interested in the walkway. Yeah, okay. He tried to brush it off, but the tough guy posturing had been thoroughly skewered. He ran a scarred hand through close-cropped, sandy blonde hair. I tell you what, Marrow. The fiancé says you were the last person to see Rocket alive, so you take a few to process your grief or whatever, but I want your butt in a chair at the station giving us a statement within the next 24 hours. After that, I'm putting out a public notice that you're wanted for questioning as a person of interest in a murder investigation. That sensitive enough for you? I stepped into the house and slammed the door in his face without another backward glance. The foyer was empty. The god-awful yellow marble floor was immaculately clean and newly polished, shining like a well-preserved mustard stain. If I'm being honest, I had expected a lot more dead brother to be there. It hadn't been long enough for health services to collect a body and for HabSec to run the full crime scene and clean up after. I breathed in the synthetic white sage floor cleaner, and for a moment I held on to the idea that perhaps Rocket wasn't dead. Maybe the whole thing had been a sick joke after all. And I think my time is up, so I will stop there.